I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. Pope Benedict is calling upon the church in America for a renewed missionary spirit to overcome a culture that produces rampant abortions, searing poverty, and social inequalities. Speaking at last night's Mass to open the International Congress of the Church in America, the Holy Father says the continent will create a culture of life only through an encounter with the living Christ. The Congress, now underway in Rome, continues through tomorrow. The Pope says the Universal Church expects and needs a church in America committed to Christ. The Holy Father's gift to our Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens is now official. The Pope's designation of a new basilica celebrated at a Mass by Bishop DiMarzio.
Today, by happy coincidence, we celebrate this feast of the Immaculate Conception as we dedicate this basilica to Our Lady of Peace, Regina Pacis.
Today is the inauguration of Regina Pacis Basilica, the celebration of the Mass by Bishop DiMarzio. He blessed the symbols of the basilica, which are the tintinnabulum, the bell, and the umbrella, the ombrellone, the umbrella that signifies the union, a particular union and relationship between this church and the Holy Father.
With 19,000 Catholic churches in the United States and only 75 are basilicas, and we're number 75, that's a great, great honor. But it also means that it's the Pope's church. The tintinnabulum is a bell on a big pole with the Pope's coat of arms on it. That is to be rung if the Pope was coming. And the umbrellino is there to greet him when he comes. It's in the papal colors of red and gold, and that would be held over his head as he arrived.
A basilica is like, it used to be a shrine, but now it's even more than a shrine. People from every generation, no matter if you are Afro-American, Caucasian, Chinese, they all come to this area now.
So in the petition that Bishop DiMarzio wrote and asked him for this, he explained the cultural and historic importance of the church, the artistic value of the church, the great love of the church by the people who built it from nothing. And, you know, those kinds of things are compelling arguments that make them understand in the Vatican that this is a place worthy of the Pope.
When a church is designated as a basilica, it's a church of special spiritual significance. They're usually churches of great significance in terms of people coming here on a pilgrimage. This church is a church that has served this community, this particular church building, since after the Second World War, as the bishop mentioned during his homily.
62 years ago, this church was dedicated. It was a church that was built because of a promise. The motto of this basilica is ex voto. It means a vow, because of a vow.
It was a church built as a vow to our Blessed Mother in the safe return of the men and women after the Second World War. And at this time there was a significant Italian-American community here, and they were instrumental in building this church in honor of Regina Pacis, which is Latin for a Queen of Peace. This whole community in this parish in particular, this church has taken on a whole new vibrance. We have Mass here every weekend in 4 different languages: English, Italian, Spanish, and Chinese. It represents the diversity of not only this area, but the diocese and the Catholics in our diocese and in the large American church.
A significant moment for our nation is how San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone is describing the Supreme Court's decision to hear cases that could set the secular definition of marriage. The court will take on 2 cases. One involves the Defense of Marriage Act, and the other is about the vote by Californians to define marriage as a union of one man and one woman. The court will hear the cases during the next year, possibly in June, with decisions thereafter. President Obama has decided to ask Congress to send us some money. He's looking for more than $60 billion to help New Jersey and New York rebuild after the disaster of Hurricane Sandy. Both Governors Christie and Cuomo say they're happy with the White House's number, although they had been asking for a combined $80 billion. The aid package still needs to be approved by Congress. Meantime, disturbing reports tonight about the work still needed after the storm. Lower Manhattan remains crippled throughout the financial district. Phones are still out, small businesses shuttered, 10,000 people out of work. Breezy Point in Queens is facing its greatest historical challenge. Devastated by fire and flood, residents are asking if the community can even be rebuilt. And we are now learning that frail and elderly residents of city housing apartment buildings were trapped for weeks as the city had no plan for their rescue. One bright light, however, is shining through these stories of woe. Don Costello is a retired police lieutenant. 30 years ago, he helped a Brooklyn family devastated by a burglary just 2 days before Christmas. The acts of kindness grew year to year, and last night at Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Queens Village, Dan Costello and Catholic Charities were celebrated. This year, they'll deliver a 17-foot trailer of toys to those most hurt by the storm. Up next, Al-Qaeda is in Syria. Details as Currents continues after the break. Welcome back. A Coptic Orthodox bishop in Southern California is worried tonight about the future of Christians in Egypt. Bishop Serapion says that at the beginning of the Egyptian revolution, people thought it was good, Muslims and Christians coming together. Now, the bishop sees Egypt moving toward an Islamic government, with critics claiming the supporters of President Mohamed Morsi are manipulating people through religion to support a new constitution for the country. Morsi's chief of staff objects to the charge.
I totally disagree with this, because it's part of the disease of the elite.
But does the Brotherhood use the fear of God and religion to convince supporters to go out and vote?
No.
Do you believe you're
No.
the party of God, the party representing God?
Nobody represents God. We are not the community of Muslims. We are part of the community of Muslims.
Tataway says only a small but powerful minority of businesses and media oppose the new constitution, which would give Morsi much greater power than when he was elected. Large and violent demonstrations have gripped Egypt as the political maneuvering unfolds, and a leader of the opposition says that Morsi himself is making conditions in Egypt worse.
Dr. Morsi is the elected president of Egypt.
And you
we
recognize
have
him as the
not
legitimate.
challenged that. This is democracy. But at the same time, the president should be aware that the public anger and the spreading chaos would affect his authority.
Well, a vote by Egyptians on the Constitution is set for December 15th. Meantime, very ominous news from Syria tonight. Word that Al-Qaeda has taken over the leading rebel force opposing President Bashar al-Assad, and they may be in control of chemical weapons. The Nusra Front is considered the most effective fighting force in the civil war against Assad. Reports from the U.S. and the region now say that the front is under Al-Qaeda control, and the French press agency reports the Nusra Front last week captured a chemicals factory formerly held by Assad forces. The Pentagon is preparing a military strike against Syria's chemical weapons stockpile if ordered by the president. U.S. warships and planes already in the region are sufficient for an attack, according to military sources. The U.S. government believes that Assad has already loaded bombs and artillery shells with chemicals for use against rebel forces. Last summer, President Obama said that could not be tolerated.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
And U.S. officials do worry that as the chemicals are moved, they become even more vulnerable to capture by terrorist groups. Yet, even without weapons of mass destruction, the Syrian civil war has exacted a heavy toll. More than 40,000 people dead, and destruction not yet fully calculated, but priceless history is being lost.
Aleppo's old city has not seen such devastation since occupied by the Mongol invaders 8 centuries ago.
This mosque, for example, dates back to 1315. This is Syria's rich cultural heritage, and now everywhere we look, it's been scarred by war.
Once bustling, winding streets, now a maze of ever-shifting front lines. Overhead, the thundering of fighter jets. A small khan, lodging for caravans down the ages, lies in ruins. For more than 3 millennia, Aleppo has been a crossroads for traders. We hurry through the courtyard of a traditional home. Sheets are strung across streets to block snipers' line of sight. Those who dare venture quickly across. A unit of fighters records people's names and license plates. Only those who have shops here are allowed through. Abu Bashir says they're trying to clamp down on robberies. He shows us the list. The highlighted names have cleared out all their possessions. In one market, a shop recently hit by army fire still smolders. A man who doesn't want to appear on camera rushes to clear his wares. The stench of filth and cordite has replaced the once intoxicating smells of spices that wafted through these streets. Down one narrow street, we run into Khalid, carrying an infrared camera he's about to install. There are government snipers, so we've started putting up cameras to observe and target them, he tells us. A former electrician, Khalid has so far managed to put up 4 and string together a jumble of power cables. As we move toward the front line, he picks up a mortar and points out the rebels' former firing position. Now they've moved it up a block. Step this way, there is a sniper, he warns. This is the rebels' so-called Field Operations Center, a flat-screen TV in a medieval setting.
The camera that Khalid wants to set up is going to be in front of the building that we can just see from here, and right in front of it is a makeshift slingshot, and that is how they're firing the mortars.
An ancient weapon deployed in a very modern war. In a narrow alleyway, the muezzin makes the call to prayer. There is no power to amplify his appeal, and his voice echoes off the walls, punctuated by the ricochet of bullets. The heart of old Aleppo, now the historic battleground for the very uncertain future of Syria.
An ancient Catholic icon in Poland has been saved from attack. The Black Madonna of Czestochowa's exact age is debated, but it is at least 600 years old. Yesterday, a man threw black paint at the icon. It was protected by glass. Pope John Paul II was particularly devoted to the Madonna. The vandal is being held for psychiatric evaluation. Up next, the Immaculate Conception, as Currents continues after the break. Welcome back. Pope Benedict is offering his condolences following the death of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Ignatius IV of Antioch. He was 91 years old and the third-ranking leader within the Eastern Orthodoxy after the Patriarchs of Constantinople and Alexandria. The Pope says the Patriarch was dedicated to the noble cause of reconciliation and peace among men. Well, dedication to Our Lady of Guadalupe is now worldwide, with one expert saying she's never seen it so strong. As patroness of the Americas, Our Lady is deeply revered in Mexico, where she appeared to St. Juan Diego in 1531. Now, large images are found in the cathedrals of Shanghai and Beijing, China. The Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe is this Wednesday, December 12th, and the Feast of the Immaculate Conception was celebrated throughout the Universal Church on Saturday. In Astoria, Queens, a very international flavor accompanied the Mass in honor of Our Lady, and we were there.
This is a patronal feast, Feast of the Immaculate Conception. This is her Immaculate Conception Parish, and so we kind of do it up with all the different cultural influences on the parish.
We have in Italia, Philippine, in English and Spanish, and we can sing in Spanish.
This wonderful Mary, this wonderful woman who said yes in everything that God asked of her. She is the most powerful, the most loving.
We come to celebrate the Mother of God, the more powerful. She's the best mother for God and for all of us in the church.
Every culture in the Catholic Church has their Blessed Mother. Everybody claims her as their own because they really feel their sonship and daughtership to her.
The Philippine here, it was singing so beautiful because for our mother.
You don't understand the song, but you still feel the Holy Spirit in here, in our heart.
We sang the Sayo Lamang. It's saying like how God is wonderful, how God loves you so much. So you just giving it to yourself to God by singing the song Sayo Lamang.
Filipinos are they say it's the largest Christian country in Asia. We have the Immaculate Conception, we have the Redemptorist Church, Our Lady of Perpetual Help. So we're all devotees of these different titles of the Virgin Mary. So the Blessed Virgin Mary is very close to our hearts.
Mary is a key essential piece to our faith. Without her saying yes and going on the journey of pregnancy and bearing our Lord Jesus Christ, it's a way it puts us in the real mindset. It is Advent already. In a special way, we recognize her birth, and it just kind of brings the entire season together, I think.
The Immaculate Conception of Mary is well-settled church teaching, but that wasn't always the case.
The dogma of the Immaculate Conception is that Mary, from the first moment of her conception, was free of original sin. She's freed thereby of any need to overcome a deficiency in her will by which she would not habitually be open to choosing the good and choosing God. The origin of the feast, sometimes called the Conception of Mary, sometimes called the Immaculate Conception of Mary, dates back probably to the 9th century. When St. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 13th century, he held that by Immaculate Conception, those who were celebrating the feast meant that Mary received the singular privilege of being freed from original sin almost at the instant of her conception, but not from the very first instant of her conception. His concern was not to divorce the Blessed Virgin Mary from the rest of humanity, which needed and needs redemption by Jesus Christ. The Franciscans, led by one of their great theologians, Duns Scotus, used the expression that through the merits of Christ, even though Mary lived before, of course, Christ's passion and death, but through the merits of Christ, our Blessed Mother was preserved from sin right from the moment of her conception. And in the end, that is the version that won the day and found its way into the dogmatic formulation of Pope Pius IX. The night before Pius IX proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, the Dominicans in Rome gathered together in the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva to pray together that the Pope would not proceed with the dogmatic definition. The next day, the Pope did proceed with the dogmatic definition. The question, of course, is, did they all immediately believe? Well, I think it's unrealistic to expect that they believed immediately. Nevertheless, they were bound to try to figure out how to harmonize the need that everybody, including the Virgin Mary, has of redemption by Jesus Christ with the text of the dogma. A dogma is a proposition. That means a sentence or a couple of sentences which very pithily express a Catholic truth in such a fashion that that truth is not subject to being reformed or changed later on. Something like the Immaculate Conception means thought about whether she was conceived immaculately or redeemed in a special way a little bit later on is over.
Coming up next, the job the Pope always wanted but didn't get after the break. Welcome back to Currents. A new survey tonight about Christmas. A large majority of Americans, 70%, believe the emphasis of the holiday should be on the baby Jesus. According to the Rasmussen Reports poll, only 14% think the day should be more about Santa Claus. And Pope Benedict is reminding us that in an increasing consumerist society, it is important that we look with the eyes of faith to the humble stable of Bethlehem. The Holy Father is leader of the world's 2 billion Catholics. He's in charge of the vast apparatus of the Catholic Church, but there was a job that he wanted that he didn't get, even after a number of tries. Now, he's appointed someone else to that position.
Meet the new librarian for the Holy Roman Church, the man in charge of the Vatican's secret archives. His name is Jean-Louis Bruguet, a 69-year-old Frenchman. He has been appointed to the job then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger vied for 3 times under John Paul II. When the Pope invited me this past April 30th, he let me in on a secret. Before being elected Pope, he wanted to be the Church's librarian. Now, of course, he cannot do that, so then he told me, I would like to realize that dream through you. The Vatican Apostolic Library and the Vatican Secret Archives have more than 33 miles of books and 37 miles of bookshelves. We are at the heart, at the center of history, the history of the Church, but also of a large part of humanity. According to Jean-Louis Bruguet, some of the goals within the Vatican Apostolic Library include conservation, investigation, and a third little-known goal but very fundamental. He called it a hidden diplomacy. A month ago, a delegation of a Chinese university was here. Naturally, Communist China does not have diplomatic relations with the Holy See. They came and offered to help us economically in digitizing 1,200 Chinese manuscripts we have here. My only condition was, once finished, to organize an exhibit in Beijing between the Holy See and Communist China. They agreed. Jean-Louis Bruguet admits that even though this is his first post as a librarian, he is very happy with the work. Still today, when I leave my apartment in the mornings for my half-hour walk here, I feel like an 8-year-old child on the way to school. I have a newfound desire to learn. In other words, it is a completely new job, but I love it despite my age. Part of his work includes publishing documents from the Vatican's secret archives, such as those dealing with the pontificate of Pius XII. According to Bruguet, they will be ready for publication in about 2 years. There is no set date. It should take about 2 years, more or less. He is the librarian with a universal outlook beyond the scope of the Vatican's secret archives, and with the difficult task of doing what Benedict XVI was unable to since being elected Pope.
Well, being Pope does have its perks, not the least of which is the Pope-mobile. And now Benedict has a new one. This vehicle was built by Mercedes-Benz based on the M-Class line and customized for the Holy Father. Construction took about a year. It is a few inches shorter than the current model, making it easier to transport during the Pope's overseas journeys. The vehicle is fortified with bulletproof glass and other security measures. One notable feature, a larger window display to give the Pope a better view, and all of us a better view of him, thankfully. That's all for tonight. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a good night.